Miss Amanda, thank you for taking your time, precious time. I know you're busy. Yeah, you finally got a time to share a little bit with me. First of all, like you have some of the credentials. Can you please share with us? I see a lot of paperwork on the back of you on the wall. Yes, and tell us about you.
Functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner. So I have a specialty in functional medicine, nutrition, and health coaching. And so it's a marriage of those two things. So I've been trained in how to help people modify their diets and lifestyle habits like sleep and exercise and whatnot to optimize their health. And my specialty is, and my special focus is gut health. So I'm really passionate about the digestive system because I feel like it's the center of all of our health. All of our health originates from there. And it's also the part of my health systems that had the most challenges. So I'm the most familiar with how to work with that and improve things. So
yeah, you almost answered my question. That would be, how did you get to, in particular, to histamine? So yeah, let's put it that way. How did you get to histamine intolerance? Like probably you had experience with that, right?
I did. I do. Yeah. I mean, just to give a very short version of my health journey, I'm 46 now, but when I was about 36, after my son stopped breastfeeding, I had this major breakdown with my health. My digestion was a huge mess. My hormones were all over the place. And I was in a really bad way. And so I started trying to figure out what to do. And like a lot of people, I started looking on the internet and started searching on Google, and I came across some information about special diets. So I started learning about the keto diet and the paleo diet and the autoimmune paleo diet and all these special diets, and was really good at that time at really going full on into a new experience, and tried these new diets, which helped a little, but I still had a lot of challenges. And I mean, even at that point, I had been having a lot of challenges over many years. So around the time I was 38, I was diagnosed with a condition called endometriosis, which is a disease of the female reproductive organs. And I decided to have this major surgery to try and take care of that, and hoping that that would take care of everything, but it didn't. It wasn't. There was a lot more going on. So then I realized I had to learn a lot more about what else was going on under the hood, so to speak. And that was how I became interested in studying nutrition. And so after I started learning about nutrition, I learned about all these new diets that I hadn't even studied when I was just an ordinary person that hadn't studied nutrition. And one of those was the histamine diet. And I did, in the end, realize that I was having a lot of allergy symptoms as well as some of these hormone and digestive challenges. So, histamine is, it's an interesting issue that affects a lot of people with digestive challenges. It's not the only thing that can be going on, but I do find that it affects a lot of people with, especially people who are having frequent and common diarrhea symptoms, allergy symptoms like runny nose, itchy eyes, hives, rash, some of those kinds of things. And they can also affect sleep and just kind of lead to digestive pain, bloating, flushing, like skin flushing, like getting like a red kind of redness on the chest or the face.
So at some point, did you figure that you had exactly histamine issues?
Yeah. And so at some point that was
of everything.
At some point that was like, oh, okay, this is part of what's going on, and then I had to work on addressing that with some changes. And some of those things that I implemented to work on histamine specifically were actually really valuable. So
how did you learn all those steps to deal with histamine intolerance?
Well, some of my training discussed it, and I, went on to learn a little bit more about it. Basically, there are certain foods that have excess histamine in them. Well, actually, let me back that up. One of the things that I learned is that, most people tolerate histamine just fine, but some of us, when our immune system gets a little over triggered or kind of reaches its limit, we can get to the point where we don't tolerate it very well. And so everybody kind of has their unique level of tolerance with histamines. And those of us who have chronic illnesses, or maybe and I think that the reason you wanted to speak with me is that people with long COVID who have this overzealous immune response going on may have sensitivity to histamines in foods and in the environment too.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but for us, because we're talking about histamine, and most of the people, they got no idea what is that, including me, before I started figuring out my way how everything is working. So for us dummies, can you please tell us what is histamine? What exactly is that?
Right. So histamine is a neurotransmitter that our bodies normally make, and it's also present in some foods. And it is commonly found in fermented foods, aged meats and cheeses. So, like salami or deli meats, or like blue cheese, things like this, and certain fruits and vegetables and nuts. And, it's part of the normal processes of our body. But again, if our immune system isn't functioning right, sometimes we can become sensitized to dietary sources of histamine and then have trouble breaking them down. Or some people have a genetic predisposition to not be able to break it down as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, partially. And it's correlated somehow, because I'm not going to try to play doctor with a bunch of knowledge here. It's just based on whatever little what I learned myself. Somehow it's related to very fancy word is mast cell activation system, right? And that's like a base of what's happening with the long COVID people, because what happened with this COVID, that nobody really even knows how all that happened. So it basically, COVID came as a virus, hit your body, and then you try to figure out what exactly got messed up. And this is how we came. I mean, some of the studies came up with the people who trying to figure how to treat that long COVID. That's how we came to the point of histamine intolerance. But first, it's coming from AMCAS, right? And how that's like a base of what exactly is wrong with the body, right?
Yeah. I mean, and mast cell activation syndrome is kind of a more systemic and severe histamine intolerance, and it can also run into the territory of being extremely sensitive to any environmental allergens like dust, pollen, chemical smells. Essentially, it's sensitivity to those things, and it's representing that the immune system is just hyper vigilant and will respond to any threat as like a really intense, it's just the body just kind of freaks out about exposure to some of these things
So what about based on my little experience, what bothering me and might activate the issues that I do have is I got three. We got food intolerance, we got pollen allergies, and personally to me, that I believe also is the major issue is stress. Would you also confirm that stress kind of increasing the histamine levels?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what happens with stress is that it just kind of decreases your body's ability to do its normal functions. And that can include things like breaking down excess dietary histamine, or tolerating exercise, or you can run into all kinds of problems with the stress level. And then the food sensitivities are a huge part of it. And then what was the third thing you said? The pollen allergies. Yeah. Yeah, environmental allergies. Yeah,
So
definitely.
based on your personal experience, how much would you give, for example, okay, number one would be food, or now like we're gonna give 50% like to the food, 40% to the allergies, 10% to the stress, for example, like based on your experience, like what exactly, because you've been studying that, you've been dealing and with clients, so based on your experience, like yeah, including the food, of course, which is mostly what you can be where you are pro, based on your experience, what are the other factors that play the major role?
Like which one of those things is the bigger player,
Yes,
or
I
yeah.
would tell based on my experience, food is very important. But what I feel like, I can tell you how I'm surviving, if we can put it that way. I'm surviving. I kind of like, and we're gonna talk about that regarding the food things, what we can eat, what we can, what is doubtful, which usually doubtful means no, better not to risk. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, based on I mean on myself, I found that my histamine intolerance rising up with wrong food. I think the same way would be with the pollen, because I'm right now in a high pollen area, uh,
Mhm.
and well, it's personal to me. I don't know about the other people, but yeah, stress plays major role to me. Yeah, it's I have a stress. I had a stressful morning today, and like I got instantly. So one of the symptoms I have, the major one, the brain fog just shooting into
Mhm.
forehead, and I'm not sure it was the wrong food. I more believe I really had a stressful morning today. So
Yeah.
yeah, based on your experience, yeah, how would you like position those factors?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm recently coming to think that stress is actually a bigger factor than maybe all the others combined. That the other factors are um, fallout from that, and by saying stress, like I don't mean that it's your fault because you're stressed out. It's just that your nervous system is kind of in overdrive. It's in this place where it doesn't know how to appropriately respond to stress, to incoming exposures, to the pollen, to the foods, to this stress experience. And so there's some really interesting work that some people are doing with something called limbic system retraining or neural retraining, to kind of retrain the nervous system to not respond to these ordinary things as though they're like a major stressful event that needs an emergency response from your nervous system. Um, so I think that, stress is a really huge piece of it. The food piece is quite important because it's a place where you have control over that part. Like you can decide what you eat, what you don't eat. So that's a place where, as an individual, we have a lot of control. But it's also it's not necessarily like stopping eating high histamine foods isn't going to resolve a histamine problem. It's just going to calm the symptoms down so that you are tolerating your life better. And the environmental allergies are so variable for people, and it really depends on the time of year. But the place where that can be a really huge problem is if people are living in a home or work in a building where there's mold, some kind of water damage or mold. So that's something that people should be aware of.
Uh-huh. So uh, for instance, well, my belief is it's just so many factors, because you can't disregard like a stress and the allergy factor and just treat the food part. Uh, it, like I said before, I mean, there's like so many things that make an influence. So let's get to the food then.
Mhm.
Uh, what you think about fasting? Like, for example, I have a histamine intolerance. So what you think about what would be, because yeah, we're gonna talk about the food, but regarding fasting, so I need to figure out probably, is it a good way just to go fasting, or is it a bad way? Because gut health is complicated, right? It's not just, yeah, let's cut out the food and it's gonna fix itself. It might go like sideways.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, fasting is definitely a valuable tool in the toolbox for calming down flares of symptoms. Yeah, so fasting definitely has a lot of really important and wonderful benefits for metabolism and also for calming down flares of symptoms like with histamine symptoms. So, um, it can be a very useful tool. It's not necessarily universally beneficial. Like some people don't tolerate it well. I find that generally women tolerate a little less well than men do. But fasting is, could be um, a good approach. And, kind of an easy way to approach the intermittent fasting thing is just to eat your dinner a little on the early side, like somewhere between like 5 and 7 p.m., and then just not eat all the way until the next morning. That's a really nice long overnight fast.
Mhm.
So, like, if you stop at 7 and don't eat until 9, that's a 14-hour fast. And
Mhm.
if you feel okay and you don't feel, sluggish or brain foggy after fasting all that long, you could even push it a little farther, depending on your comfort level, and have an even longer fast, and then eat between the hours of 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. or shrink that. That's the window you can shrink to maybe get some increased benefit for metabolism or calming down symptom flares.
So what about the fasting with zero food, just on the water for a few days, for example?
Water fasting, I personally don't recommend that, but I know some people feel really well when they do that. Something I often recommend instead of water fasting is using something called an elemental diet for a couple of days. It's in that it's accomplishes some of the same goals, but you're not literally completely fasting. So an elemental diet is like a diet shake that's it's like pre-digested nutrients, so that it absorbs in the small intestine rather than traveling all the way through the gut, and it can kind of give your whole gut a rest for a couple of days. And so this can be a good uh, technique to just calm down inflammation in the gut in the short term. You can do it exclusively for a couple of days, but because it has all the nutrition you need, you're not going to have some of the same side effects that fasting can cause, like foggy head or feeling tired or lethargic or whatever. So
So as far as I understand, intermittent fasting would be the better option, right? With
I think so. I mean, there are reasons to do longer fasts, but for someone who is, yeah, I would just be concerned about that leading to extreme fatigue for someone who, like, is fatigue kind of part of your long COVID symptom picture?
here is the weird thing. Yeah, I mean, everyone is complaining because I'll be representing like the people's symptoms, not just my personal.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Everyone is complaining about the fatigue, uh, and me personally, what I do have, how I mean, long COVID, the histamine intolerance is hitting me. It's hitting the brain fog to my like forehead and the eyes, and
Mhm.
out of that, somehow I have like that type of fatigue,
Mhm.
uh, which I guess is all related. But I, even with the brain fog, I could still go to the gym and do some things there. I mean, without crazy like movements, because the brain fog is just not allowing me to do that because I'm like getting, lost a little bit. But I could still do that. So it's more like brain fog that causing the overall uh, fatigue of your body just because it's overloaded.
Right.
Yeah, if it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, that brain fog, and also with the long COVID. Yeah, the people with the long COVID, they complain a lot of times that they getting out of the COVID symptoms, except the brain fog and partially fatigue, which again, we're getting back literally to the same thing that histamine
Right.
intolerance means. So
Yeah.
I don't even know, to be honest with you, I don't know how they got histamine intolerance. Somebody figured that.
Right. Yeah, well, and I mean, I think that fasting, it really depends on the person. It's really individualized, and some people tolerate it just fine, and other people really can't go very long for that kind of fasting, without feeling even increased brain fog and fatigue. So, it's the kind of thing like where I always recommend to people that, do an experiment, try it for yourself. And, if it doesn't feel good at all, then that that's not going to work for you right now. And if it does, then maybe you can include that in your ordinary ongoing toolbox and work with that. So
yeah, you see the negative part and you probably understand, and you saw that you're getting one thing wrong and it's throwing you back for like 3 days. and,
yeah.
and it's very difficult to, like you said, to test one piece or the other one, because I mean, personally, me, I was scared already. I'm like, okay, no, I better just stay on the water for 2-3 days. Then I start testing like piece of, I mean, some meal. I was just really not because I had like some things going on, so I'm like, okay, no, I don't want to test that type of meal today because it might like go sideways. So
Right.
yeah, we got intermittent fasting with for instance, if somebody wants to do that.
Mhm.
Most important question: what we can eat? We're gonna eat something. So okay, tell us please, like, okay, probably it's going to be a limited amount of what you can tell us, but what the most, like the safest things that we can eat? Okay, I know, and tell me if I'm wrong. It's for example, for me, blueberry, right? Blackberry. I got carrot, and I don't remember what else. Okay, you tell us what we can eat. Like, this is the safest things, go for them. I mean, if you want to, like, tell us if you guys want to fast for like 48 days, 24 days, just on those type of vegetables or fruits, just go for them.
Okay. So one of the biggest important things with histamine intolerance is to avoid eating leftovers. Have you run across that piece of information in your research?
Yes, and
Okay.
I'll tell you one more thing about that later. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the first thing, especially leftovers with meat in them. And that's just because as the food, after it's been cooked and then put away, as it ages after cooking, histamine content increases by way of, just naturally occurring bacteria in there that start breaking down the proteins in the meat. So that's a really big one. If you're eating meat products, you want to have them freshly prepared. And then if you want to keep leftovers, you can freeze them and save them for later. But if you just store them in the refrigerator or leave them out, that's not that's going to cause some problems for you. So basic, simple grains like white rice are a low histamine food. So those are and also things like winter squash um, for carbohydrates, and potatoes and sweet potatoes can work too for a carbohydrate. Proteins can be.
I'm sorry, I got a joke. You just saved all the Asian population who got long COVID with that white rice comment. But
Yeah.
I mean, some other folks too. But okay,
Right.
what else
Okay. Yeah. So that's for carbs. It's good to avoid really refined carbs because those can sometimes histamine can be about gut bacteria populations. And so refined carbs like sugar and, white flour products can feed those bacteria and make things a little bit worse. So you have to experiment and see how you tolerate those things. Meat is okay, again, as long as it's prepared fresh or has been, was frozen and then thawed and cooked right away, and then leftovers are frozen.
question?
Seafood and
Question.
yes.
When you're saying fresh meat, does it mean that, I mean, obviously there is not everyone got meat like market or something, does it mean that it's better go for the frozen meat from the store other than just like the frozen, other than just the cold packed?
It's really hard to say because it really depends on the practices of the store. And so, for best safety, I mean, basically, if the meat is still safe to take home, and it's not past its due date, I think that's all right. But the farther away from its due date, the better. So, like if the due date is April 1st,
Mhm.
and the day that you're shopping is like 10 days before, that's better. But if the due date's approaching, you would want to look for a package that's been more recently packaged and put out on the shelf. And if you're going to take it home and not cook it right away, then you would freeze it and then thaw it again later to cook it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
Mhm.
yeah, so then fish and seafood, and so like clams, mussels, shrimp, all that kind of stuff is generally higher in histamine than land meat, beef, chicken, pork, turkey, that kind of stuff. So
Cut off fish.
yeah, fish is a no-no.
Okay.
But you can't, as long as you're practicing these other safe practices with the, other kinds of meat, it's generally okay. And then, like I was saying, preserved meats like deli meat, sandwich meat, sausages, salamis, like anything that's aged. Yeah, prosciutto, sort of preserved meats aren't, yeah, they're a no. But so yeah, you're looking at fresh prepared meat or meat that's been frozen and isn't kind of preserved or aged. Let's see. Dairy products, the longer aged cheeses are worse, and the really fermented products like yogurt and kefir are fermented, so they're probably higher in histamine than things like like a cream cheese or sour cream. Well, even sour cream is cultured. So milk and cream, if you tolerate those things, are going to be lower in histamine than cheese. And you kind of will have to just sort of finesse this for yourself, because I've noticed that it's really different what people's tolerance levels are, and people will find there's some things that they really react strongly to, and somebody else, even though they might have histamine tolerance, it doesn't bother them. So but just as a general rule, the longer aged the dairy product or the longer fermented it is, the more histamine. So, something like blue cheese that has mold in it, right? That's a high histamine cheese, but something like a cream cheese is a, very short culturing and fermentation process. It's going to be a lot lower in histamine. So there's sort of a spectrum there. Let's see. And then in terms of vegetables and fruits, so you have like free access to things like lettuce, dark leafy greens like kale, all the, the brassicas like cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale.
Broccoli, okay?
It's okay. Yeah. What else? Radishes, carrots, onions, garlic, what else? Bell peppers are fine. Zucchini is fine. What else?
Let me challenge you. Vegetables in a pack, which marked as organic or whatever, but they are packed.
Yeah. I think they're fine as long as they're not, with vegetables, it's a little easier to say which vegetables are high histamine. And so as long as they're primarily eggplant and spinach and tomatoes are kind of the big three vegetables that are higher in histamine than others. So, I think prepackaged vegetables are fine. They don't, because again, that histamine process that where foods accumulate histamine after storage is really about the proteins. Mm-hmm. And, vegetables have a little bit of protein, but it's a small amount, and it's not enough to really lead to a histamine problem from fermentation or bacterial breakdown.
Okay, multiple questions.
Yeah.
Let's go for like the person is a savage, for example, and the person will be like, okay, I don't want to experiment. Give us please 3 meals, 3 foods, just the food that completely safe, like top 3 for you.
Top 3 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of like to create meals that have a healthy starch, a protein, and some fiber. That's sort of and some healthy fats. So, a little bit of white rice with some butter, cooked chicken, and a green salad.
Oh, okay. I was like, so there is no vegetables.
Yeah, I know.
We got some.
Yeah, although the salad piece is tricky, right? Because the dressing, you got to get creative with dressing with the histamine issue because you can, the citrus juices and the vinegars are high in histamine. So, yeah, people have to get creative with. There's some great recipes out there on the internet with vinegar-free salad dressing.
Or you can advise some, right? If somebody contacts you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So my another question was that food on default. How the hell you calculate that histamine? Because I don't even get it. Okay, we understand that fermented food or aged food got higher level of histamine, but like on default, who is doing that testing? Why, I mean, that type of food got high histamine? Why tomatoes got high histamine? Like, who is doing that? Because
Yeah.
why I'm asking, because I went through like so many resources to check, and it varies. Like some food, somebody's saying high histamine, somebody's saying low histamine. There was some cool guy who did research, and he went through all of the resources, and he had like forgot how it's called, whatever. So for every food, it was saying, okay, this resource saying is high histamine, this resource saying it's low histamine. So
Yeah.
who is doing all those researches? Because we can't trust anybody, and basically what I feel, every food trying to kill me one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just sort of nerdy food scientists that are curious about this topic and they do testing. And it's true that the content does vary, and one thing that really can vary it with, especially with the fruits that are high in histamine, so things like avocado, tomatoes, bananas, is ripeness. So, it's something to be aware of, like, you want your bananas a little bit towards the greener side of the spectrum rather than really ripe and spotted, right? That more ripe avocado or banana is going to have more histamine than, one that's just barely ripe and ready to eat. So yeah, these things matter, and not all of them are going to matter for everyone. I want to make sure that your listeners can understand this piece, that not every single food on that list is going to bother everyone.
Why not?
Why not? I really don't know. I think it really just has to do, I think, with the fact that we're all unique and no two of us are the same. And for some reason, some people can tolerate certain histamine foods, whereas other people can't, or they have a lower tolerance to that food. So that like a histamine food list is a starting place, and you have to get clear for yourself about which foods are your worst triggers, and make your personal list, and then get some clarity about, okay, I need to avoid this one for sure. Whenever I eat this, I get a lot more itching, my throat gets itchy, or I get a headache, or I get tired, or whatever happens for you. And then, but some of them, it's like not going to be a big deal, or that, oh, I can eat a small quantity, and as long as I keep it to like a quarter of an avocado instead of a half or 3/4 of an avocado, I'm fine. There's variables for all of us.
Mm-hmm. I have a little list of some of the food, and I'm gonna shoot you name, and you say yes, I don't know, or no. Which
Okay.
they're gonna, I don't know, most likely gonna mean for us no. So
Okay.
yes, that's a good news. Okay, coffee.
Coffee in most cases is okay.
Hummus.
Hummus is, I believe that the garbanzo beans can be relatively high histamine, but I don't consider them like a super high histamine. So that's a maybe.
Coffee with milk. Sorry, I'll get back a little bit to coffee.
Coffee with milk.
Yeah.
I think that should be fine for most people.
A soup or like, okay, not soup, because soup goes tricky. Bone broth.
Bone broth is a high, like a long cooked bone broth is a higher histamine food. So that's a no. If you want to do broth, you want to make it yourself with, like a short cooking time period rather, like the traditional bone broth is cooked for, 12 to 24 hours to get all that good stuff in there. And it's really a healing food. It's also high histamine. So chicken broth, not long cooked. For me, I boil my chicken carcasses like an hour or maybe 2, and that's it.
Tea.
Green tea or black tea?
You can tell us difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Tea is included on some histamine lists. I haven't necessarily seen it be a problem for people, but I know that it's included on some. So that's a maybe.
Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate is what's called a histamine liberator and aggravates some people, others not. So that's a maybe.
You said dressing might go tricky. Olive oil.
Olive oil, okay.
What else is okay?
For dressing?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Yeah.
If any okay, yeah, give us. If no, we better
yeah.
not.
Yeah, I mean, so I think like the fermented vinegars, the live vinegars, so like an apple cider vinegar that's not been pasteurized, or any vinegar that's not been pasteurized, balsamic, red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar is going to be a relatively high histamine. You might, test it for yourself and see which ones you tolerate better or worse. Same with lemon juice. The least likely one to be reactive would be a vinegar that's pasteurized, or something like rice wine vinegar might be a little less reactive. So you'll have to just try the variations and see which ones you can tolerate the best. And if you might not be able to, or you might find, oh, actually this one's okay, the others aren't. So.
Okay, and the most important, probably every people, they like nuts, and it's so many of them. So which ones we can go, I mean.
You know what? Let me pull up my list, because the nuts, there's so many of them. And like, they're very different. So that's why I can't, it's hard for me to keep it straight in my mind. Let me take a look here.
I like all of them. I'll be honest with you. So whatever you're gonna pull, I'm gonna like all of them. And I bet a lot of people too.
Okay, let me pull up my.
Yeah, if any of them safe, please.
Yeah, I think. Let's see. What does my list say here?
I'll tell you, peanuts killed me.
Yeah.
I went down under the bench in the local zoo. Yeah, because I bought peanuts and I was feeding animals, but I was so hungry, so I was eating myself. Yeah, I didn't, but by that time I didn't even know anything about histamine. So I was still like under long COVID, but I didn't learn about histamine. Killed me.
Right. So my list here says that especially peanuts, cashews, walnuts, and sunflower seeds are on the high histamine list. So, what's missing there, which are possible options to try and see how you tolerate them, would be things like pecans, macadamia nuts. What else?
Buy nuts, we're gonna run out of money on credit cards.
Right. Or like, I know, right? Or maybe like sesame seeds, would be all right. Yeah. So, I mean, and again, like I've had histamine intolerance, but sunflower seeds don't bother me. So I think they're maybe a little less likely to be bothersome. Yeah. So
And bakery. I don't really eat that, but it's probably an important thing. Something out of bakery or bread, like what can be tolerated on some level.
yeah, so like I was saying, refined flour products like bread or crackers, tortillas, like that kind of stuff, may aggravate a bacterial problem. So which can affect histamine. So I think, ideally you're of, and particularly just, this isn't a high histamine food, but for a lot of people, gluten sensitivity is an issue. And I would imagine that for long COVID patients, that might be a factor. So that would be something to consider, avoiding gluten, wheat-based breads and moving to a gluten-free option if you're going to eat breads and refined carbohydrates. Same for pasta.
Went to Mexican restaurants, few tacos, body shaking a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, true.
Yeah.
So without okay, like we are on, for example, some type of diet, following strict food. How long without the symptoms we gotta go before introducing like different histamine high or like some average level? 14
Yeah.
days, yeah, there is some level, right?
Yeah, I mean, typically what I'll recommend to people is to try and do as strict of a elimination as you can for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. And if you find that that's helped you, then that's a really good indicator that yes, these histamine foods are, affecting your symptoms, and so you're getting some relief. And then that would be the time to carefully, one by one, reintroduce foods. And you would start with the foods that you miss the most. So like, and just see where you go from there. If after that initial 2 or 3 weeks you haven't noticed any change, that's a pretty good indicator that the histamine isn't the issue, or there's other exposures that are continuing to keep things going. So right, that might be like mold in your home, or it could be the environmental allergies, which you don't have control over really, right? But yeah, 2 to 3 weeks, you should see a response or not, and that's a really good indicator to help you decide what to do next.
Supplements. To take some, there is really expensive ones, and I know they might be a good ones as well, because I mean, what is it, histamine blockers or creating those DAO, right? So what about supplements, anything that might help?
Yeah, the DAO enzyme can be really helpful. And then along with that, some of the sort of more natural antihistamines are things like quercetin is it's a plant compound that is antihistamine. Also, vitamin C can really help with histamine tolerance, and is also just a really basic and powerful antioxidant that would be good for people with long COVID, I would imagine, just given the inflammatory nature of the virus and what happens to people's bodies. So yeah, magnesium, vitamin B6, so a B complex can be valuable. And also stinging nettle, either tincture or capsules, or even if you have access to wild growing nettles, can be a valuable antihistamine.
So is it any testing that, for example, yeah, I don't want to go crazy, start experimenting, and I can go straight somewhere and test myself for histamine?
The best test is really to do the elimination diet and see how you respond. That's a pretty clear result. Like if you do that and you feel better, that's a pretty good indicator that histamine is the problem. There is a blood test called the whole blood histamine test that you would have to access through a healthcare provider. And so that can be an indicator about a histamine problem, but it's not really like your ordinary doctor isn't going to really know much about that or want to run it. And I'm not sure of the level to which it's validated or not scientifically. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's hard to test for it. Like really the best test is like, do I respond to the low histamine diet and the DAO enzyme? You know, if I respond to those two things together, it's a pretty good indicator that yeah, histamine is a major player here and I need to handle this.
All right. So we covered a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It will be difficult to keep up with, those like little meals, like a little bit of that, little bit of that, little bit of that. For somebody who is foodie and they need dishes. So how they can contact you and you tell like, okay, you make a plan how to work with their diet. Tell us how to find you.
Oh, how to find me? Yeah. Probably the easiest thing would just be for people to head over to my YouTube channel, which is Confluence Nutrition. I do have several videos over there about histamine intolerance and how to manage it. And then, yeah, if people want to learn more about working with me, you can visit my website, which is confluencenutrition.com. And if people want to schedule a consultation, I offer a short free consultation for us to talk about whether or not we're a good fit for working together. And there's a link to do that right on the front page there. I think it's called, schedule an assessment session or something like that. So,
Gosh, yeah, I'll put it in the description of this video. So
okay.
thank you so much. We got food intolerance. We gotta have a right balance with keep out of the pollen. So now we have a mask time. So it's fine to walk around in the mask, because it would be weird probably even just like a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
And the stress, right?
Yeah, stress. And yeah, that, I mean, more than the supplements, if you can work on, things like daily meditation or self-hypnosis apps, like different things to help just calm your brain and nervous system down, that is likely to get you even farther and more balanced than even the food piece. I mean, it's part of it, but
Yeah, and I can confirm that when I have a good days, it's just a good day, nothing bothers me. And if something doesn't go right, yeah, then I start thinking I ate something wrong, which might be also true. But yeah,
right.
the bad day hits me
Yeah,
double. Yeah, the bad day
totally.
hits me double. That's how it's working.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're so welcome, Sergi. So
Yeah,
did I say that right?
yeah. All right, guys, you had a pleasure to enjoy this conversation. Bye.
Bye.